right, so now the star of the race. And the star of the race is one of the best parts of the race, I would say. So the Yukon Quest, I mean, is by far the coolest start to any race that I've done so far. So you got literally thousands of people out there that come to support. Now, the weather conditions that we had, it was negative 50 at the start, and the dense fog that we had, the visible conditions were really, really bad. So it was kind of, I think that kept a lot of people at home, and you couldn't really see that many people at once, so it really kind of brought back or reeled in kind of some of those expectations, so to speak, as it was last year. Last year, I mean, there was thousands upon thousands of people. This year, there's still thousands of people, but you're only seeing like maybe 20 people at once, so it's not like holy cow, there's a lot of people out here to come see this start. And like I said, so on top of that, one of the reasons it's really one of the better parts of the race is because all that pre-race anxiety is now gone. Like I said, you're just going through kind of in your head every possibility, whether there's a moose on the trail, the sled breaks, your brakes don't work. I mean, when the dogs there's just so many possibilities of things that could go wrong, and you're just kind of going through that in your head the entire time, and just the pre-race jitters, the anxiety of that, all that, as soon as you start, is gone. Now you're just running dogs. Now you're just settling into the race. And it's now like the first run is always the funnest because you're relatively energized, you're relatively well rested, depending on how much sleep you got the night before and the week leading into it, compared to you're as well rested as you're going to be for the entire race. Let's put it that way. So that's why that first run is always kind of one of the best runs. I mean, it feels like you're just on a little fun run at that point. So it's like I said, as soon as they actually tell you to go, all that pre-race stuff's out the window, and you kind of drop all that anxiety. Now you're just on the runners, actually running dogs, just doing what you've been doing all winter long with these guys. And that's what I always liked about the start. I mean, like I said, the spectators and the fans actually being there, that's super cool too. But you're leaving all those pre-race jitters behind, and now you're just going. And like I said, so when we started the race, we had a tag sled behind us for the first, it was like a mile or so. And we come out, and we were at the Morris Thompson Cultural Center, known as the Visitor Center here in Fairbanks. And we shoot out from the start chute right onto the Keaton River, which is one of the main rivers that cuts through Fairbanks, like right through the middle of Fairbanks. And if you drive through Fairbanks at all, you're going to be crossing it multiple times. But we start right on the Keaton. And literally, we went down, took a hard right, and then went under a bridge, and we're on this ice. And like I said, with the fog, you couldn't see anything until it was right in front of you. And all of a sudden, just right out the chute, there's this huge rock that just went right between my runners, hit my brake, hit my tail drag, and then hit the tag sled. I'm assuming the brake on that with the guest in it. And I looked back and they were still there, so I was like, all right, I don't know. Like, honestly, like, that's not my priority at this point. Like, I'm in the race at this point. Like, if they hang on, that's fine. If not, the sled's getting dropped off where I got to get it dropped off. Like, so I wasn't too worried. I mean, we're concerned about it, I guess, but I was more worried about my sled. I don't want to sound selfish, but I got to take this sled 300 miles. That tag sled has to go a mile, if that. And like I said, hit the brake pretty hard, and I think it actually did mess up a little section of my tail drag, which I'll talk to later on the second run here. But so like that, like first, I don't know, 500 feet, 1,000 yards, that happened. So I mean, I wasn't sure if the brake was okay. Like, I tested it right after that and it seemed to be, but you never know. And like I said, I mean, so much planning and training and time was put in for these guys to make it to the race, and to have something like that just happen instantly was all right. But you just got to adapt to that. And every single musher had something not go their way during this race, and during every race I've been in, there's always stuff that occurs, and you just got to adapt to it and just move on. The faster you can just move on, because things are going to break, things are not going to go your way, and like I said, you just got to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and just move on, forget about it, have a short-term memory, and just keep on pushing. So that's what we did. And then went right into our next challenge, was actually the drop for the tag sled. So for this tag sled, this was the first time I've ever had a tag sled behind a sled, or a tag sled hooked up at all, that I was actually had to hook up and had behind me that I wasn't on. I've been on a tag sled before, but didn't have to hook anything up. So we were kind of figuring out the best way to do that, and we ended up using an additional gang line section that hooked up to our gang line through the carabiner, and that worked really good. We didn't have a quick release though, so a lot of the mushers would just have a quick release where they could just pull the cord, and then it's a quick release, that tag sled's getting dropped, and then they're going to keep on going. They don't need to stop. We didn't have that, so Erica actually rehearsed, so that way I could just step on the brake, she would run off the tag sled, unhook it from the carabiner, and then I could just go. So we rehearsed that like 10 times right before we started the race, as we found out that we were actually doing this. So we rehearsed that quite a few times and felt pretty confident on that. And then got to the point where actually I dropped the tag sled, hit the brakes, Erica ran up. I was messing with my seat. Just forgot that because the bungees, so I had a cooler on my back, and I had it the entire time in training hooked with a bungee. And I had one bungee that we did a whole bunch of training runs with, and it was fine. And then like the training run, my last training run, that bungee fell off and got a different bungee, but it wasn't the same length, so the tension on it was slightly off, and I was trying to seat cushion on this for the first time, and I hate trying something for the first time during the actual race, but it just kind of worked out that way. So the bungee I was using wasn't the right tension for that cooler, and I kind of knew it going into it, but it was what we had. So actually, either on that rock, I think it was that rock we hit, that bungee came loose, so I was kind of dealing with that for that first mile. So as we came to that stop, I was trying to reattach the bungee on the cooler, and then got that down, and then Erica said that there was a problem. She couldn't get the bungee, or the gang line off the carabiner. So I set my snow hook, ran up there, as she was kind of escorting the guest. And what happened was, we have like an actual, it's basically a bungee, so there's two carabiners, and we hooked it to the front carabiner, which probably wasn't the best option, but that carabiner, being as cold as it was opening, the actual lock on it was open way easier than this rear one, so I decided to do that one because I figured it'd be easier. And then once there was tension on it, it hooked right into the bungee itself and kind of got caught in there. And with the dogs have full tension on that, so it was almost impossible to get that other gang line out of that bungee. So I ran up there and like was able to get a little bit resistance off the dog and just give that all I had, and got it loose and ran back on the sled. And then screamed, "I love you" to Erica. I don't think I kissed her at that point because I was just like, had to go. Like, we wasted when you're in the race, it feels like forever. I mean, it's a 300-mile race. We're talking like 2 to 3 day race, and this is like a 30-second ordeal. But at the start of the race, like the very, very start of the race, you just have like such intensity going into it, and every little thing just it feels huge. Like I'm talking about. I mean. So really we had 3 things in the first mile happen to us. But like I said, you just got to move on. Once you're going, you're going. So was able to get that and then just continue out in the chute, or out on the Chena, I should say. And then at that point it was pretty smooth sailing. I got the bungee kind of settled in. And then every so often I'm kind of looking back, making sure it's still there. And then it was just a nice smooth ride on the rest of the Chena. And that's what's nice going, the Chena, like I said, cuts through Fairbanks, so you're cutting through basically people's backyards, and there's a bunch of people that come out and are hooting and hollering, and last year some people ran out and were giving me cookies, and somebody tried giving me a beer, and all that fun stuff. And then there's usually snow machiners out there that are hanging out, having fires on the river, just kind of watching the show. And there was a little bit this year, like I said, being negative 50 degrees, it really kept a lot of people at home, I think, because of how cold it was. So there's less of that this year. There still was quite a bit of it. And then you keep on going, you kind of progress down the Chena, and before you know it, you're actually outside of Fairbanks, just kind of beginning to get in the middle of nowhere. And then it was a pretty uneventful run after that. So I had one team pass me before I even got off the Chena, because that was my strategy. I really wanted to start conservatively with these guys. And it is a big challenge to do that, because as I talked a little bit about the intensity at the start of this race, I mean, you're up here and the dogs are up here because they had a couple days rest going into this, so they always just are screaming, hooting and hollering to go. And then as soon as you go, and we're used to, for the most part, running up and down hills, we have a lot more up and down terrain than a flat, frozen river, which is the first 40 miles of this race. So they were just charged, and I'm riding the drag mat and my brake to slow them down. And I didn't want to go over 10 miles per hour. And I was trying to even go a little bit slower than that. I don't know if we had the data what I actually ran on that first run, but I was trying to really pace them like almost 9 miles per hour max, because in the race, it'll feel like you're going 10 miles an hour, and you look at the tracker and it says 13. That's what happened for us last year at the Willow, because I got into the first checkpoint and Eric was like, "Why were you going so fast?" And I was like, I felt like I was going 10. You're like, tracker said 13. I was like, holy cow. So that was like I said, I was really trying to pace these guys going into it, and felt like we did a pretty good job with that. So I was honestly kind of excited once these teams started passing me. So we had second place pass me, like maybe, I don't know how long into the run, quite a bit of ways, and it was faster than last year. So last year, like I said, I started first as well, and I kept on looking back, waiting for another team, waiting for another team. I believe there was only 2-minute intervals last year. This year there was 3, which I kind of liked. So it starts everybody off a little bit more spread out, because in the beginning everybody's just right on top of each other, and nobody's really kind of pacing themselves, and then you can get bundled up pretty quick. So the 3 minutes, I kind of liked that a little bit. But anyway, so I had one team pass me, and then once one passed me, another one did, and then I think Jonah passed me, and I let him by, and then we were going like the same pace as him, and so I was kind of pacing off of Jonah until I actually stopped and stacked my team. And then shortly after that, Brent passed me, which was pretty cool. I don't know. I've had Brent pass me last year when he was running the 550 and I was running the 300. It was head-on pass, but have him actually in the same race and have him pass me was pretty cool. And talked to him a little bit. He said, "Hey, it's nice to see you," something like that. And I was like, "Yeah, I hope I get to see you again," as he's running by, and I never did. Minus him passing head-on. But even just seeing him run, I mean, I was trying to just pick up as many techniques and soak up as much knowledge as I could for that little bit while I could actually see him in front of me. But then after that, pretty uneventful. Nothing really memorable after that until we got close to Two Rivers. Then you're back kind of on the road systems and doing these. You're coming off a trail, then onto the road, and then back on the trail. And in between that, there was some fan or somebody that was passing out warm Gatorade, which was really cool, because hydrating is a big challenge for us while we're out doing these races and training runs, especially when it's negative 50. Like, you don't want to drink water. So Gatorade's always nice, especially a warm Gatorade. Not only it won't freeze, but it's also something warm that you're putting in your body. So somebody gave us that, and I just slammed that like all in one gulp, and that was really cool. So shout out to whoever did that. If they ever see this, that was awesome. Keep doing that. And then after that, like, hit the road, and then all of a sudden it's like a 90-degree into this trail, and they had it marked, and then they had a sign with like a big arrow saying turn here, but that sign was past the trail, and usually all the markers are before it. So the leaders kind of went past it, and then I was like, no, G. And then they finally came back and then got into a little bit of a tangle. And I think that's when Walker actually got a cut on basically his forearm, on his wrist, which I didn't notice at the time. And the checkpoint was like probably a mile after that. So we get into the Two Rivers checkpoint. Our strategy was always to blow through that. I said contingently we might stay there if I'm just super frozen, because it being -50, -60 degrees or whatever it was out there. I told Eric that was a slim possibility. I got into the checkpoint, signed in, check all your gear. They check for your mandatory gear, which I'll explain right now, and then that way you guys know what I'm talking about going forward. So your mandatory gear they have in your sled. So you have a cold weather sleeping bag, you have a cooker for the dogs, you got fuel for your cooker, you got 2 sets of booties, an axe, and I think that was about it that they required for this race. I don't know if I'm missing anything, but basically just the stuff you need to actually go out there and mush. It's stuff that we bring with us all the time, whether we're doing these races or not. So they just check that, and your vet book. They're going to look at that, make sure you have that too. So they look through all that, and then you're good to go. And then, like I said, we're always blowing through it, and the vets instantly came and kind of checked the team out real quick. And that's when they noticed Walker had a little bit of a cut, and he was bleeding decent amount. So the blood that was there made it seem and look a lot worse than what it actually was. It was pretty superficial. We could have just wrapped it and he could have continued, I'm sure. But since we were blowing through and didn't know the extent of his injury, and we had 14 dogs. Last year we ran the 300 starting. They only had it capped at 12 dogs, so I knew we had depth. So I ended up making the decision to drop him there, which was tough because it sucks anytime you got to drop a dog, because you want every dog to finish. I mean, like I was talking, we put so much time and energy and everything, and so do the dogs. I mean, you just want them to finish for their sake. Like, I mean, I don't know if they really care, but we care. We care that we want them to finish every race. So it really sucked having to drop Walker right at the start, because he really is one of our best dogs, and he is a lead dog. So we had, I think we started that with 7 dogs that can run up front, but really like 4 good, consistent lead dogs that have a lot of experience of actually running in lead. So he wasn't in lead when you dropped him, but I knew he was one of our best, definitely our best reserve lead dog. So having to drop him at the first checkpoint definitely sucked, but just like the issues that I had prior, like I said, you just got to move on. So I talked about how we had to drop Walker, and since I talked about that, I'll actually explain a little bit about what that actually means and entails, and why we start with the amount of dogs that we actually start with. So we start with 14 dogs hooked to the front of the sled for these races, and really that is way overkill. So anything at your really 8 to 10 dogs, you're not going to go any faster. You have more energy than you need, and at that point you just make it more and more challenging and harder to hang on and stop the team. But the reason we start with 14 dogs hooked to the front of the sled is because the dogs you start with are the only dogs you're allowed to use during the course of the race. So you can't start with 10 and then pick up Y and cookie dough halfway through and replace 2 dogs. So the dogs you start with are the only dogs you're allowed to use during the course of the race. So we start with more dogs than we need, because chances are over the course of a 300-mile race, or especially a 1,000-mile race like the Iditarod, you're going to be dropping some of those dogs for minor injuries, whether it's a sore wrist, an upset stomach, or a female dog comes in a heat, something along that nature, where something minor. We're going to always ease on the side of caution and drop that dog if they have a sore wrist or something minor before it turns into something major. And like I said, Y had a small cut on his forearm, and we had plenty of dogs, so we just erred on the side of caution. So I decided to drop him there. And same thing, if you're running on the trail, the entire time I'm on the sled, on the runners, I'm looking up and down the gang line, and I know exactly what every single gait of my dogs look like. I know what they look like when they're excited. I know what they look like when they're hungry. I know what it looks like when they're towards the end of the race. I know every single dog's gait for all the different conditions that we go through. And anytime if I notice anything slightly off on that dog, on the way they're running, I'm going to focus on that dog and just pinpoint that dog out. And then next time we stop, or I might stop the team right then and there, I'll go inspect them, manipulate all their joints, see if they react to anything. And then if they do, load them into the sled. We'll take them to the next checkpoint. Talk to the vets there. Every single checkpoint for all these races, there's volunteer vets to help facilitate you. They have full authority to look at your entire team. They can inspect and do anything they want. They have full authority to drop the dogs too if they see something that they don't like, because that is the number one priority is the dogs themselves and the care that goes into these guys. So like I said, dropped Walker there, and then that's the significance of that vet book. So that vet book has a page in it for every single dog, and it has to get checked off every single checkpoint. So if X vet at checkpoint 1 notices something with Y, then that's going to get logged in the book, and you can't hide it from the next people, so to speak. That's the significance of that vet book. So as soon as you go to the next checkpoint, they're going to look at your vet book. They're going to know every single thing that other vets saw, annotated, so on and so forth. So they're going to go look at anything that was annotated, and then they're going to check off, see if it gotten worse, see if it gotten better. And like I said, they have authority, if they want to drop those dogs too. So that's kind of how that dropping procedure works. So like I said, we dropped Walker. He goes to the vet. Then they will actually go through and kind of do what a vet would do. So I think they wrapped him up. So they wrapped him up. Did they give him any? They didn't give him any medication or anything. He didn't need it there. But sometimes they will. They'll give him like aspirin or ointment, or it depends on the dog's injuries, or if they're fatigued or whatever there is. They can administrate IVs. They're there for the well-being and care of these dogs. So once we drop them, it goes to the vet so they can care for it. And then once it's cared for, it'll go to our handler, which is Erica, and she then takes custody of the dog basically, and then has a dog with her for the rest of the race. So that way she isn't lonely in the truck. She had Walker with her, so that was cool for her, but I would much rather have Walker on her team. But like I said, it's just one of those things. Well, before I get too far down into that rabbit hole, that's kind of what it is to drop a dog. And I had a design for this sled, which included a trash can on the back, which was my straw carrier. And I was really looking forward to use that during the extent of this race. And I was not able to because it broke. And I found that out as soon as I left this checkpoint. Alright, so we came into Two Rivers. Like I said, had to drop Walker. And then in Two Rivers, had a bale straw and 2 drop bags. So pulled up to that, grabbed the straw, put it in my trash can that was behind the sled. Like I said, I had it rigged up. I thought it was so slick because that trash can, I think we did a video on it that we probably maybe mesh into this. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit on this because we're getting a bunch of comments, questions, concerns why we have a trash can back here. And for any mid to long distance musher, I mean, this speaks for itself. It makes total sense for those who don't really know much about the sport or more sprint mushers. They wouldn't really conceive this. But talking on the sled itself, back in the day prior to the tail drag, which is this part of the sled, the behind the musher part of the sled, basically, it was just this where you had the sled bag out front. It'd be a little, pretty well much longer than this, and everything would be in front of you, which has its advantages and disadvantages. Back when mushing was a way of life here in Alaska, the freight sleds, I mean, that was where you carried all your freight. If you wanted to go from village to village, town to town, I mean, you were taking a team of dogs to get there, and you had to carry everything out front. Now that we have transitioned, this is more predominantly for racing, to keep the tradition of mushing alive and these dogs be able to do what they love to do. Racing is the main avenue of approach for that. With that being said, the heaviest part of the gear is the musher themselves. So putting them in the center allows a few different things from maneuverability, control of the sled, and for a few different things. I mean, having a seat back here is revolutionary. On top of that, but main, so kind of going on tangents here, but the reason I have a trash can back here is mainly for carrying straw. So if we're doing a long distance train run or during races or anything like that, camping trips, you're going to be bringing straw for the dogs. Because anytime you're actually stopping and rest the dogs, that's going to be one of the first things you do, is take that straw out, put it down, and allow the dogs to bed down and rest instantly. Not only that, which most mid-distance, long-distance mushers will have something like that back here on their tail drag if they have a tail drag system. Usually it's kind of a bag, which has, again, its advantages and disadvantages to this. The reason I went with a trash can like this is because this is relatively lightweight, it's durable, it's waterproof, and it doubles my storage capacity essentially. So I essentially have another sled bag back here that fits a bale of straw absolutely perfectly, and also gives us, when I'm not carrying straw, I can put various gear back here. I have right now a cooker and some coats for the dogs that I can just pop this off, throw the coats on them real quick, instead of digging in my sled and having to do that. As well as anything that's just a lot of volume, that takes up volume in the sled, that's lightweight, I can put it back there. It's not going to affect my steering or capability or anything like that. And then on top of that, if I got to load a dog up, we did a video earlier, we had to load up so sitting on, to kind of explain that a little bit. So that's something that you got to do occasionally in that event, especially in a fully loaded sled. It can be an issue. A lot of times before, people had these, be hooking everything up with extra necklines and just attaching it to the sides of your sleds, like your coolers, your cookers, your sleeping bag, anything and everything you have in your sled, they got to take out in order to put a dog in, because that dog's always going to be a priority. So now, if I do have to load a dog in, I can literally take practically everything out of my sled bag and put it back here, and it's still going to be contained in a waterproof system that's easy access, and it gives me room. If I got to load up multiple dogs as well, I can do that too. And same thing if I have straw back here and I got to load up dogs, I still can put some gear here, or I can opt out to take the straw out, put it on top of my sled, get rid of the straw. It just opens up the possibilities for that. So that's why we went with this. And it's also got, it's sturdy. I've tipped it once. I got about 300 miles on it since we added this, so it's holding up so far pretty good. And really 300 miles is all I need for it this year for these mid-distance races. And I got handles back here. It's got handles on the trash can itself. Like I said, it's lightweight, durable, and waterproof. To give you guys kind of an idea of it. So, went and grabbed the straw, put it in my trash can, put the lid on, we had 2 drop bags. One drop bag was just full of meat. The other drop bag had like my food, extra gloves, matches, things of that nature. So grabbed what I needed out of that, grabbed a handful of meat for the other, packed the sled full, and then we took off. And as soon as we take off, the trail kind of parallels Chena Hot Springs Road for a while, and you're going up and down on all these different driveways and businesses, that are coming off that road. That trail's going off from a trail onto a driveway, back onto the trail, and it's just these really hard transitions, and some are really big bumps. So the sled was kind of taking a beating, and the entire time I'm looking back to make sure the trash can's there. I just kind of periodically do that, and that cooler's back there. I already had the issue with the bungee for the one cooler. So look back there, like right after I left, after one of those first bumps, and I seen that the trash can, the bottom of it had broken off where it was actually attached to my tail drag. So now it's just kind of attached to my handlebars on the back, which move freely because the trash can itself was all kind of securing itself together. And going into this race, I had, I think, 700 miles on the sled with that trash can attached to thoroughly test it out. And there was 0 incidents, so I felt confident it would be able to make the first 220 miles of this race, which is all I needed. After that, I was planning on taking it off anyway to reduce weight, but that's neither here nor there. Like I said, that first bump, leaving the first checkpoint, now that it's actually got weight in it, because prior to this I had nothing in it, so that as soon as we got into the checkpoint, I could grab the straw, put it in there, didn't have to take anything out, put it back in my sled bag so it'd be as fast as possible. Put it in there, and now it's got weight on it, so it's got something actually torquing it. And hit that first bump, and I noticed that the trash can was lifting up off the tail drag, and it was all leaning back. So now I'm trying to kind of hold it a little bit, and then we hit. I stopped to snack right after leaving the checkpoint because it was time to snack again. I didn't want to do it in the checkpoint itself and kind of be in people's ways, other mushers' ways. So I got snacked right after we left. Boom. So as soon as I'm starting to snack, Jonah, who came in ahead of me, he went into a chute for a second, I think, and then left. So I don't know if he was just making sure his gear was good or if he snacked his dogs there in the chute or how we did that. But I ended up leapfrogging him in the checkpoint. As soon as we left, stopped to snack the dogs. And then Jonah actually passed me as I was doing that. And then as soon as he went by, we took off again. And we were just getting to the point where we were on his butt, and he was about to stop the team, probably to let us go by. And then one of those transitions we hit where the trail actually deviated, and his team went right, and then had to go back and go left on the actual trail. And so my dogs, I figured, would follow the dogs, and not the way he went, but they went the same way he went. So then I had to haul them, and then they did that, and then we had to go over this bump that was literally like this tall. And so he did that. Sled came down, and then the whole back of the trash can just fell backwards. So I had to stop the team there, and I had a bunch of spare bungee cords in my sled, so I pulled some of those out, and I'm trying to bungee it together and rig it together. And like I said, it's basically still just the start of the race. We're 4 to 5 hours into it now, but it still feels like we just started. So your intensity is really high. You saw how close everybody was at the last checkpoint. You know how many teams are ahead of you, so like that intensity is still right there. And any little thing like that. And like I said, so now I know I'm going to have this issue for the rest of the race. And like I said, all our training that we had from January on consisted, or even prior to that, because we had the trash can, knowing that it was going to be our strategy to use that for our camping trips to carry the straw. And all that's just ripped away, literally leaving the first checkpoint once we actually need to utilize it. So I was going through all that in my head and trying to fix, repair, mend to keep it going. So I threw a bunch of other bungees on it and got it to a point where it was kind of good, keeping it from falling backwards, but then it was coming forward because there was nothing resisting it, moving it forward. So every bump we'd hit, it'd come forward, I'd push it back. Or if I had to come to a stop, it would come sliding forward and hit me in the back. So I had to brace it the whole time. And then once we kind of got going again, after I bungeed the living hell out of it, we kept on going. And then you actually have a road crossing where you cross Gina Hot Springs Road. And it's a pretty big transition from that before you actually go off onto basically the wilderness, and you're kind of leaving the town pretty much forever at that point for the rest of the race, minus Central and Circle. So there's a video, I think, of me actually doing the road crossing, and I'm literally just hanging on to the back of the thing because we're coming in and it's bumpy and the thing's just going like this. And then after that, once you get off that trail, it kind of smooths out for a little bit. And then before you know it, it actually turns into a pretty technical route. I don't really remember how many miles into it turns technical, but it definitely did. And there was a few hard kind of switchbacks where you're going downhill, and then there's a turn, and then there's another turn once you're going back uphill, and there's overflow and just all this crazy stuff. And not only that, there's a lot of just kind of these like wavy patterns in the trail from different conditions can allow that to have it happen. What makes for a very bumpy ride, and that's what we were dealing with. And I'm, like I said, just like it was literally like this. Like I'm trying to just hold the actual sled with one hand and trying to hold that trash can from being too abrasive. Looking back and seeing how many bungees I lost. I mean, I probably lost 7 or 8 bungees just on those first couple of runs. That I guess I should say from 2 Rivers going to 101. But then as we progressed, I got to the point where I kind of thought it was okay, and we hit this really, really technical thing. So I was holding on to the sled, and I had limited steering because I only had one arm being able to do it. And it went to this little switchback. We hit this little bump here, and then just literally got airborne and like went sideways and just came down, and the front of the sled just got pulled into a stump, and I went flying. Like the sled was caught, so it wasn't going anywhere, but I went flying. And it was thankfully the sled did caught right there, so the team couldn't go. But that's when I broke my phone. That trash can was just kaput after that. My water bottle broke. I don't know if we got it. Yeah. So this right here used to have an actual handle on it, and another plastic piece, and a piece that would hold the handle so you could actually grab it. And this is all metal, so later on in the race, without that handle there, and this would actually freeze up because of how cold it was, and I couldn't open it. You cannot touch this without gloves, basically, because this was frozen and my hands were like getting froze. Anyway, so 3 things broke right off the bat. My phone was probably one of the bigger things, and like I said, that trash can fully broke off, which was kind of good because at this point I could fully remove it from back there because the way it was attached, unless I completely broke it off or took off my handlebars in the back, I wasn't able to remove it. But since it did break off like that, I was able to unbunch it from my handlebars. Once I unhooked it from the stump, I guess I should say, and we got the team going again, we waited till we got to somewhat of a clear spot. And then I just stopped the team, snacked them again, and then I came out, or got off the sled and took the trash can off, put it on my sled just like you would for a bale of straw, and I was able to do it that way, and then bunged it on the front of my sled, and then the handlebars, like I said, the trash can is what was actually holding them up. So I actually pushed them down onto my cooler, and bunged them down onto my cooler, which helped make everything more secure. It kept the cooler in place, it kept the handlebars in place, but it also had basically these 2 rods sticking out that over the course of the next run impaled me multiple times. Luckily it wasn't anything severe. One time, I mean, I guess it did kind of catch me from bouncing off the sled again, going up a hill. Anyway, yeah, so at that point, got the trash can on top of that, and now starting to feel more secure about it. So there was a huge time dump. I probably had to stop before I actually stopped and completely removed that trash can from the back. I had to stop 3 or 4 times to readjust straps and, like I said, put it back in place and just do everything I can. So a huge time dump on that. probably lost an hour just dealing with this trash can before it was fully removed. And an hour in a 300-mile race is a pretty big time. So, and yeah, I don't know. So, finally got to the point where I had it secured. The tail drag was secured in a good enough area to continue on, and we kept on pushing. And then after you have events like this that happen during the course of training runs, during the course of races, and emotions go from that, and then as time progresses, they slowly cool back down, and then you're just back on the runners, just running dogs. And so as time went on, kind of went back into that, and then the trail became more technical. Like I said, those you'd see there was these hazard signs from the trail markings that made an X. Anytime you saw that, you knew you're about to have some fun, whether it's one of those switchbacks going down into a valley and there's overflow, or you're coming up and there's overflow that's been coming out, but now it's all frozen, so it's just this huge sheet of ice, and it's slanted like this. So the dogs run straight, but your sled slides in until there's loose packed snow, and then it catches, and then you're getting dragged through trees as it's going, and you're trying to kind of get footing to help kick the sled because it's in this really unpacked trail, not even a trail now. So you got a lot of those kind of things going, and it keeps the excitement up, keeps you awake. I didn't remember it being this technical last year, but last year we had a lot less miles on these guys, and they were a lot less crazy basically going through that stuff. So it felt a lot more technical, a lot more challenging to just hang on and steer the sled through a lot of those areas. But just kept on pushing, got through that. And then our initial strategy was to go about 20 plus miles outside of Two Rivers and actually camp on the trail there. And just kept on trying to find a good spot to camp. That was an issue I had last year in the same section of trail. Last year we stayed at Two Rivers and then broke up this, 73, 74 mile run into two runs. This year blew past Two Rivers and then broke that basically into two runs. So both times though, just trying to find a good place to camp. So an ideal place to camp on the trail, to kind of explain to you guys, is either a place where the trail is really, really wide and you can pull the team to the far side, or a lot of the times on these trails, a lot of snow machiners use the same trails, and occasionally they'll go off trail and make a perfect track, and then they'll come right back on. And those are absolutely perfect for dog mushers to stop and camp a team. So I was really looking for one of those in an area that was well suited for camping. So as we progressed and started passing these other teams that were actually camping, kind of utilizing some of those good spots, less and less of those spots became available. And then the wind started picking up and it started to get cooler. And we're the elevation was changing quite a bit. The terrain was changing quite a bit, where we'd go from a densely wooded area to a wide open area, to a densely wooded area to a wide open area. And I wanted a relatively densely wooded area that's higher up in elevation, because I know the dogs would rest better in those, because you're going to be less windy and it's going to be warmer the higher up in elevation you are because of the inversion layer here. I won't dive too deep into that. If you guys want to Google that, go right ahead. But basically, cold air sinks, so the higher you go up, the warmer you are. So I was trying to find an area that wasn't wide open, that blocked some of the wind, and that was higher up in elevation, and that was a good place to camp. And it just felt like it wasn't happening. Those things, like, it got to the point where I felt like I was almost going too far, and we weren't really getting those things lined up. And then it got to the point where it was like, all right, I just gotta stop and camp these guys. And got to a point where it was up high, densely wooded. There wasn't a good place to really pull off, so I actually stopped my team like basically on the trail, and then just made packs on the right-hand side of the trail to actually bed the dogs down. It wasn't ideal. The dogs could still get off from their straw into the trail, which isn't ideal, because then the other teams that I passed that are camping I knew would be coming by. And then when that happens, the dogs are they're not gonna like attack them, but they kind of like, hey, what's up, bud? And it just can be a distraction to the other team. So I knew that'd be happening. So I knew that once I actually bedded them down, I wasn't gonna sleep because I wanted to make sure I'd keep an eye on the team. I wasn't gonna get in a sleeping bag where I couldn't, if I had to. My biggest issues would be if a tangle occurred, if the dog came out and they got into their gang line, and then you got to separate them. So I wanted to be ready, basically, in case that happened. So I knew going into it I wasn't going to sleep. So once I actually stopped, camped them, you set your hook, unbooty all the dogs, get your cooker out, start making food for the dogs, and then you feed them out. And then I wasn't really hungry. I didn't eat anything going into the race because I usually don't eat my first meal of the day until about noon, and my nerves were just going, so I wasn't hungry. I just ate a bunch of coffee, basically. So I just ate some coffee before the race, or drank some coffee before the race, and then didn't eat before it, but wasn't really hungry at this point. Now it was 9 o'clock at night when I actually stopped, or 8 o'clock. It was 8 o'clock. I did a 9-hour run, my first run, which is what we trained and prepped for. It felt like we went further off than what I initially wanted to, because, like I said, always just trying to find the perfect camping spot. I knew I did that same thing last year, so I felt like I had that knowledge going into it, and wasn't going to repeat that same mistake. And we ended up going a good distance for the dogs, but still wasn't the best spot. But I didn't want to keep on pushing, trying to find that perfect spot and go further than I wanted to. So once I actually found an accessible spot, like I said, bedded them down, gave them some food, and then got my isomat out and laid on that, and basically got some shut-eye for, I don't know, about 30 minutes or so.